Welcome to the Last Supper. We serve lies, deceit. We're half off on deception this week. Betrayal, gaslighting, jealousy, envy, heartbreak, cheating. There's a special on that one also. Revenge, and even a little redemption. My name is Wicked, and I'll be your guide to infidelity tonight. Now, let's get to our story.
I betrayed my husband, and, no, I didn't cheat, but I don't think my husband will ever forgive me. I, 33F, betrayed my husband, 32M, let's call him Joe, and I don't think he'll ever forgive me. Please help? I won't bore you with a long list of hows and whys. I'll try to include as many detail as I can, but this will already be long enough, so I'll just keep it simple. 5 months ago, I betrayed my husband. Let me explain. My husband and I have been together for almost 10 years, we have 2 children, 6M, and 4F, and I can say, without a doubt, he has been the most loyal, attentive, and incredible man I could have ever wished to be my husband. He's perfect. He's smart, handsome, loving, an excellent provider, an incredible lover, a wonderful father, determined, and maintains an excellent physique. In short, he's everything I've ever wanted, ever needed, and I refuse to picture a moment without him in my life. We met in college, started an online graphic t-shirt business, and now have large-scale merchandise in nearly 45 different retail stores. Of course, during our first few years things were tough, even frustrating, but we worked hard, continued to push forward, and around year 3 one of our designs went viral and business took off. In less than a year, we went from barely getting by, to clearing $200,000 in sales, and we haven't looked back since. During our senior year, he proposed, and I accepted. Business was great, we were crazy about each other, head over heels in love, and a marriage had been something we both wanted since our first years together. Eventually, as the business continued to grow, we were able to hire a full staff, dictate the majority of the work to those in a supervisory positions, and assume our true positions in ownership. This allowed us to fall back, take our hands off the wheel, and focus on the two of us and growing our family. But success does not come without its own downfalls, and, unfortunately, the people you once regarded as close friends are the ones that tend to pay the price for your advancement. And my friends, people I've known since high school, were no exception. I'm a fairly attractive woman, outgoing, and I've never had a moment when there wasn't some guy, hanging around, willing to show me some interest in whatever capacity I allowed them to do so. In fact, in high school, it would be safe to say that my girlfriends and I would be considered that group of girls that exists within every school in the country. Hot, sexy, beautiful, and extremely popular. And even now, though I've never given any of them a moment of notice, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that a would-be suitor or two hasn't approached me to shoot their shot, and I've had to send them away with a look of regret on their face. Given that our high school lives seem to mirror each other in many ways, I've always been open to Joe about the fact that, while I wasn't a whore by any standard, and was often labeled as a dick tease, I was a bit of a party girl, had more than a few boyfriends, and was known to indulge in few illicit drugs every now and then. Of course, that life was over, though some aspect of it carried over during college, and Joe and I actually met at one of those college parties, but those days were long gone, and I was proud of the person I had grown to be. However, as you might suspect, as my relationship with Joe grew stronger, and the business slowly began to take shape, any time I had for my high school friends was nearly non-existent. Now, I'll be the first to admit that things had diminished between my high school friends and I, since I left for college, simply by default, with some going to other universities and others choosing not to go to school at all, but they had nearly come to a complete stop since meeting Joe. It wasn't Joe's fault, it was simply the way things worked out, but it was definitely noticeable to the other girls. And, though it was often due to Joe picking up the slack and carrying most of the weight, I did manage to make it home, on a few occasions, to spend some time, enjoy a weekend, and just have fun with the girls. After graduation, though we were now in different locations, the girls and I pledged to always keep in touch, never forget about each other, and to meet up, every now and then, and just spend some quality girl time together. However, given the success of the business and then raising our children, the most I was able to offer was a random phone call, every so often, and some nice presents on birthdays and holidays. In August of last year, I received an email from one of the girls that directed me to a private Facebook page and group chat, meant solely for the graduates of our high school. Apparently, though I was unaware, the page had been up for nearly 8 years and there were indications of the girls having gotten together on vacations, at theater events, at amusement parks, at ball games, and at nightclubs throughout the years. Honestly, I don't know why, given that Joe and I often went on the most wondrous vacations, and had traveled the world with a reckless abandon, but, for some reason, I felt like I had been cheated out of something, like I was missing out, and I even became slightly angry about it. Joe, being the loving husband he is, noticed something was off with me. And while I didn't go into detail about it, fearing it would only hurt his feelings, he was able to calm my soul, bring a smile to my face, and simply told me to reach out and talk with someone about why I was never asked to participate. So, after some deliberation, I did. I reached out to one of my friends, asked her what was going on, and she just laughed. She said there was never any ill will towards me, or any reason for me to feel slighted, but, simply put, that I had changed, acted like I was too good to hang out anymore, and they just didn't think it was my kind of thing. She even directed me to a portion of the group chat, where they were discussing me and how I wasn't that chick anymore, and that everyone knew it. I know it was irrational, especially since my life was as perfect as it could get, but I was pissed. How dare they say things like that, to outright dismiss me like that, had they forgotten who I was? I began to follow the page almost religiously, joining in on the chats and catching up on old times, and slowly began to find myself feeling a little like the old me. I started noticing the looks of guys more, even actively enticing a flirt or two, but never did anything more than offer a smile, for my efforts, and just walking away. I knew it was wrong, and there was no way I would ever jeopardize anything I had with Joe, but it was like I wanted to prove something. And, as strange as it may seem, it wasn't to myself. I was secure in who I was, but I wanted to prove it to them. I began to cling to the chat room as if it was my lifeline, adding more and more friends to my personal Facebook page, and even began to add a few of the guys I knew from high school, even old boyfriends, and began to develop open dialogues, nothing flirty, with some of them. Joe and I had complete access to each other's social media, across the board, and, of course, he began to notice the drastic change that had come over me all of a sudden. To his credit, he didn't approach me from a position of jealousy or accusations, though he probably had the right to, but, instead, sat me down and calmly talked to me about boundaries and about never allowing any doubt to creep up in a relationship because it causes problems. I listened, apologized for getting too caught up in the past, and promised to slow down and look at things from a more wifely point of view. But I didn't. And not only did I not pull back, but I slowly began to get more flirtatious, my attitude continued to change, and eventually it began to spread out into my relationship with Joe, with me being sharp, overly sarcastic, and even rude to some extent. Joe, bless his heart, put up with it, mostly because he had suddenly taken on the role of the primary caregiver in the house, and simply continued to express his feelings about the situation. I don't know why I couldn't pull back. I could see what I was doing, see how much my husband was trying to get me to turn back before things got out of hand, but I had to do it. I had to prove a point to the girls. I had to remind them that I was still that chick. On the 1st of October, I got a text from one of the girls. At some point I had added a secret app to my phone that Joe didn't have access to, and most of the real conversations with the girls were now over that app, and she informed me of a party that would be taking place in mid-November, and wanted to know if I was coming. And, without hesitation, I said yes. Looking back, I knew it was stupid, that I had no reason to accept, given how badly I'd been acting already, but I had to go, I had to show them. Somehow, I had rationalized that this was it. I knew I had been acting like an ass, and was taking Joe's patience for granted, even his love, but, in my mind, I told myself that, after this one night, I could put all of this behind me and go back to being the woman that Joe loved. The only problem, as I saw it, was Joe. I began to test the waters, throwing out subtle hints about a trip with the girls in the spring, and was met with exactly what I figured. He was opposed, not directly, but he wanted me to sit back and just look at things clearly. That he understood my wanting to keep in touch with the girls, or even go out, but he felt that a trip was pushing things because he felt they were now a bad influence and didn't have my best interests in mind, pointing out that only one of the other girls was married and she was on the verge of getting a divorce. Instantly, I got angry, rushed to the defense of my girls, and walked away, in a huff, after a heated argument. Eventually we made up, though things were still a little tedious, but it was clear that I would never be able to ask him if it would be alright to go to the party now. So, I made a plan B, enlisted the aid of my favorite aunt, who lived in the same city as the party, and set up a premise where she wanted me to come for a visit, during one of our conference weeks in November, and wanted me to bring the children with me. Joe, of course, was completely in favor of this, even relieved, given the fact that it stopped me from talking about the trip with the girls, and he even helped me to make the arrangements, at the same hotel as the party, to ensure I wasn't a burden to my aunt. I know it's going to sound odd to most of you, given how much effort I put into deceiving Joe, but, on the morning I got into the car, Joe lovingly kissed me goodbye, and I drove off. I was actually racked with so much guilt, I nearly turned back and put an end to the entire thing. But I couldn't, I needed to do this, and they had to know. I arrived a full 2 days earlier than scheduled, a deliberate act, and actually went to spend some time with my aunt before, after spending the night with her, leaving the kids in her care and making my way to check in at the hotel. Doing this, I surmised, would solidify my alibi, in case Joe would ask, which I doubted, and also helped with the guilt that continued to eat at me. I checked into my room at the hotel a day earlier than any of the other girls, and actually spent the night on the phone talking to Joe. I informed him of all the things my aunt wanted to do over the next few days, all of which were legit, only it would just be her and the kids, and let him know it would be hard to find time to call him, even contact him, during that time. He had visited my aunt before, completely understood, and just told me to call, or text him, whenever I could. He said I love you, I said I love you, and we ended that night like that. The next day, I packed a bag, left my room on the 4th floor, and made my way upstairs to the penthouse suites. The plan was for all of us, my girlfriends and I, to share 3 connecting suites. There was more than enough room, and just spend the next few days having fun, with the party being held on the second night. I freely admit, on the first day, I was completely blown away. I had forgotten how much fun it was to hang with everybody and all the things we had in common. They were absolutely the same, still beautiful and still crazy, and, up until the moment I opened the door, to a thunderous cheer, they weren't sure I was actually going to show up and seemed genuinely happy to see me. It was great, and for a second I actually questioned why I hadn't done this before. But as things continued, I began to realize that some of the things they found gut-busting funny, I found to be almost repulsive. The way they treated people, and acted in certain situations, was way over the top and unnecessary. And, though I kept the same energy I came in with, and refused to show it, I actually felt out of place and began to realize I had been in love with a memory, more than anything, and found myself thinking of Joe and just wanting all of this to be over. If I was able to turn back the hands of time, and take all of this away, I would do so without the slightest bit of concern for whatever laws of physics it would break. Everything about that entire day just felt off, the way they were looking at me, the way things felt, the strange sense of heaviness in the atmosphere, everything. It all felt wrong. And by the time of the party, with all of us nearly half drunk, I wanted nothing more than to run back to Joe, throw myself into his arms, and just have him tell me he loves me over and over. It was that last drink before we left, at least, that's what I think, because that's when I think I was drugged. Everyone was there, everyone, all of my friends, male and female, from high school, as well as some local clientele, and the party was everything I had expected it to be. It was wild, and the later it got, the more the liquor and weed kicked in, the wilder it got. And it was exactly what I wanted. It was loud, crazy, wild, sexual, and completely over the top, and I made the most of every second, with my girlfriends in tow, and watching with awe as I played the room. I didn't go overboard, though I will admit to a lot of flirting, a lot of conversations being entertained, and a lot of amorous touches being allowed, but I swear I never allowed any guy to press the issue or take things too far. At some point I began to feel like my body was heating up, as if the only thing I wanted to do was take my clothes off, and suddenly felt a sense of giddiness that I couldn't get rid of. I was more relaxed, my body feeling as though I was floating, and at one point I realized a guy was rubbing on my ass and, for the life of me, I couldn't do anything to stop it. I began to think that the alcohol was getting to me. I had never been a heavy drinker anyway, and somehow broke free of my stupor, and away from the guy, and practically staggered to the middle of the dance floor to join my girls. It was something we always did, our thing, and it had become a staple that every guy in the club, during high school, waited all night to see. We met in the middle of the dance floor, drunk, wild, and just began trying to outdo each other with the most raunchy and sexual dances we could come up with. The crowd cheered, the girls were screaming, and I, feeling the way I felt, left nothing undone, eventually, believing I was dancing with one of my girls, finding myself grinding on an ex-boyfriend, in the middle of the floor, with his dick riding my ass for all he was worth. I damn near froze when I turned around, saw who it was, and instantly left the floor with everyone laughing and screaming. I made my way to the bar, my mind swimming as I tried to understand what I had just done, and I ordered another drink. One of my friends appeared beside me, smiling, and leaned against me half drunk. She smelled as though she had been swimming in booze, ordered another drink, and then told me, without the slightest concern for Joe, or for me being married at all, that Ken, the guy that had been riding my ass, wanted me to come and holler at him. It all hit me at once, all the lies, the deceit, the emotional cheating, all of it, but something wouldn't allow me to respond properly. I looked over her shoulder, my body literally moving on its own, as Ken motioned for me to come over, and I actually smiled. It was as if every ounce of inhibition had been turned off, every bit of common decency gone, and for a second, the longest second in the world, the only thing I wanted was for Ken to walk over, take me by the hand, and lead me out of here. I didn't want him to fuck me. My love for Joe wouldn't allow that, but, at that moment, I knew I wouldn't be able to stop him if he chose to make a move. Somehow, as if Joe had screamed at me to turn, I forced myself to turn away and thought I caught my friend emptying something into my drink. She smiled, handed it to me, and insisted I drink with her. I did, regretting it instantly, and immediately excused myself to go to the bathroom. I made my way through the crowd, damn near blind now, and glanced over my shoulder, finding Ken speaking to my friend and then making his way through the crowd in my direction. It all came crashing down on me then, and I knew I was in trouble. The bathroom was just ahead, with a tiny hallway leading to a private area in the back, and something told me I can't, under any circumstance, let him catch up with me back there. I continued ahead, lost myself in the crowd, saw Ken make his way back towards the bathrooms, and quickly made my way out of the club and to the elevators. It was hell waiting, with each second my heart was pounding, and the world was spinning around me more and more, until I threw up, the doors opened, and I forced myself inside with a rush. I was desperately pressing the button, somehow convinced myself that Ken and the girls would be coming after me, and hurriedly pressed another button before it was too late, choosing to get off on the 4th floor instead of the penthouse suites. It was all I could do to force myself to move forward, my body wanting to stay in the elevator and simply hold up the wall, but I made my way out, somehow, I don't know how, found my room, and even managed to pull the correct keycard, on the first try, and get inside. I collapsed to the floor, scrambled around to lock the door on nothing more than a savage instinct to survive, and somehow crawled to the couch and passed out. It was nearly evening, the next day. I had been unconscious that long, before I finally woke up. I was dazed, my head ached, my stomach was in knots, and I felt as though my body had been ran over by a bus. I tried to piece things together, tried to come to terms with how I had even gotten here, before clarity finally set in, and I burst into tears thinking of what had nearly happened. I heard a phone ring, searched for it, and found my purse on the floor by the door. The ringing had stopped. It was my aunt, but there had been over 100 missed calls and countless text messages from Joe that had went unanswered. I opened the last one, a video posted on the website about the party, and a simple message asking what was going on. I think I started crying then and haven't stopped yet. My aunt was a little upset with me, though more worried, and the kids couldn't have been left in better hands. The day before I left to return home, I checked the website. There was nothing about me being drugged, about what they tried to set up with Ken, but there was plenty of praise and applause for the way the party had went, and how they all knew I was still the same old bitch, that wild chick, and how they all knew I hadn't changed. It worked. I had proven my point, left nothing to doubt, and it was all pointless. Eventually, already knowing what was coming, I called Joe. I think he understood what I was saying, though most of it was through my endless crying and unending apologizing, but, like always, he listened. He listened, cleared his throat, and then asked me to listen. He informed me that he had seen the video, seen glimpses of the things I had done, and asked if I had cheated on him. I answered no, that I would never cheat on him, though I knew, given all the lies and deceit, that he had no reason to believe me. He asked if I truly understood how lucky I was, that, given everything I'd done, how badly things could have turned out for me and what could have happened if I didn't have another room to go to. I tried to answer, I think I did, but I was crying so much I'm not certain if I did or not. He asked me to explain why? I honestly couldn't. For some reason, I tried to explain. When I found out what the girls thought of me, the way they looked at me, I couldn't accept it. I became fixated on who I used to be, despite everything in my life being great, and just wanted to shut them up. That I wanted to show them that I was still that girl, the girl they knew, and that would never change no matter what I did. That, while trying to show them all of this, I got caught up in the past, caught up with everybody starting to come around, and began to like the attention I was getting from the girls, and, by default, from the guys as well. He asked if he had done something to me that made me feel like her life, the life we shared together, was no longer enough, or had ever been enough. It broke my heart, everything I had done to him, the way I had treated him, and promised that he had always been the perfect husband and had never done anything but treat me with love and understanding. That all of this was on me, and I was stupid for allowing something so petty to come between us and never meant for him to ever doubt me, our marriage, or my love for him. He asked if the guy the first was dancing with meant anything to me. I quickly told him no, that I would have never done anything like that if I was in my right mind, and the guy was the same guy, an ex-boyfriend of mine, that I believed would have attempted to rape me that night, and that I believed my girls were all in on it. He then told me he loved me, and asked me to listen. He told me he was angry, that he couldn't understand why I felt I needed to do something like this, and he wasn't certain if he ever would. He then asked, given the way the party went, what did I believe the girls thought of me now? I honestly didn't know how to respond, but answered that they, given the party, probably thought I was still pretty cool. He agreed, but then offered his own assessment. He agreed that they thought I was cool, but it was far more than that. He believed the girls would think that I'm definitely that bitch. That I was a straight savage, a boss, and all of them would love to be me right now. That's what he thought of the situation. He then asked, given the way the party went, what would the girls think of him now? I was taken back, it was something I had never considered, and he took my silence for what it was. I'll tell you what they're thinking, he answered for me. They're thinking your man ain't worth shit, that I'm a joke, and every time I ever call you, my girl, from now on, they're going to be laughing at me because you've clearly shown them otherwise. Your friends, thanks to you, now have no respect for me at all. I tried to object, but he corrected me with a simple truth. You might not think so, he offered, but I do, because I see it for what it is. I can almost promise you, if it hasn't already happened, that one of your friends will reach out, knowing you're with me, and still let you know about an ex, or some random guy that likes you, wanting to kick it with you for a while. I gasped, alerting him to the fact that it had already happened, and he scoffed. And that's not the worst part. The worst part is that all those fools at the party, all the guys, your ex and everyone else, now have absolutely no fucking concern for me at all. Because, how can you be my girl, when they saw you grinding on another man's dick like that? How can you be my faithful wife, when you were allowing all these guys to chat you up, spend time with you, and entertaining their conversation? No, you've turned me into a fucking goofball, a clown, and they'll have no problem pressing you, right in front of me, because you've already disrespected me, so why can't they? I lost it, barely able to hold myself together, but he wasn't finished. But, do you want to know what's really fucked up about all of this? More than the lies, than the shit that happened at the party, more than any of it? He paused. It's the fact that you, my wife, the woman I love and try every day to give my best to, the mother of my children, felt it was more important, to you, for you to verify that you were still, that girl, to your friends, than it was for you to validate that you were my woman to everybody in the fucking room. Because that's something I would have never done to you. He then released a heavy sigh, told me he was glad I was okay, told me to have a safe ride home, and then informed me that he couldn't promise if he would be there when I arrived. And he wasn't. I called him, texted him, but he didn't answer. The next morning he was sitting in the living room, playing with the kids, when I woke up. He asked for a few signatures, on some business paperwork, and then spent the rest of the day with the children, ignoring me completely, before leaving after putting the kids to bed. He's always around, pretty much every day, but he's just being cordial. On Thanksgiving, he came over, we had a great dinner with some family and friends, other than my aunt, no one else knows what happened, and we spent a few hours putting up the Christmas tree. It's a family tradition. I guess, for the most part, things have been like that ever since. He's here, but not here, and I guess I have no choice but to accept it until he's willing to give me a chance to prove myself once again. I've asked if he would be interested in going to counseling. He's not opposed, though he feels that such things are meant to help you correct the mistakes you've made, to improve yourself, and he feels as though he's giving me 100% of himself, 100%, and I still wasn't satisfied, and he doesn't see how he can do any more than that. It hurts, to think he now feels that way about himself, and that I did it, but at least he's still talking to me. And, if he's only there to help me understand why I felt so strongly to act the way I did, why I was willing to risk everything for a group of people that now throw little slick jokes about him, I'll be forever grateful to him. It's been nearly 5 months now, and we're still stuck. He's continued to do the things a good husband would do. Valentine's was a great day, present-wise, for example, and he's still the greatest father in the world to our kids, but I'm beginning to think I'll never get my husband back. My little sister, 27, finally joined the group chat, saw the video, and immediately reached out to me to find out what was going on. We talked, I explained the situation, and she cursed me out for being a fool, reminding me of how much trouble I used to have with the girls, back in the day, and how I was so glad to be getting away from them. She hasn't let up since she found out, even cursing me every time one of the girls posts something about it or something slick towards Joe, but at least I have someone to talk to. As for my girls, I cut all contact with them. The page, the group chat, the secret app, all of it, gone. And it wasn't worth it in the first place. Not in comparison to what I was willing to lose. I know now that everything I was doing, the manipulation, the lying, the conversation with men behind his back, were all forms of emotional cheating. That the physical things that came later, while benign in regard to a sexual encounter, only compounded things. And that while I was fortunate to not have been raped, it's actually only due to Joe providing me with a separate room that I'm able to say that, and I know that, in a lot of cases, a lot of young women weren't so lucky. I've also come to understand that your past is nothing to trifle with, that some demons are meant to be forgotten, or the wickedness you left behind might be the hell awaiting you in your future. Please, I fully know I fucked up. And I know that it's only because I have a great man in my life that I'm even able to have a chance to fix this at all. But please, please, if there is anything you can offer, any advice at all, please help me to fix my marriage.
We hope that you enjoyed your meal and shall return for others. Please feel free to drop a comment, like, follow us, and subscribe for more content and merchandise. Thank you for your patronage.